Welcome back to FreightWaves Now on this Thursday morning. It's time to check in with Matt Trapp, CEO of the Harbor Trucking Association. Matt, thank you for joining us this morning. Great to have you.
Thanks, Kaylee. Good to see you.
So we're talking kind of all about what's coming to the markets, right? And we're watching COVID shutdowns in China, and we're watching this kind of slowdown all across the trucking market in the United States. But I'm still sitting here wondering, is there another blow coming to the West Coast ports from what could be happening and what's like kind of building in China right now?
That's the consensus. From what we hear, we're looking at 20 to 30% increase in cargo volume over the next few months here. We're leading into the ILWU PMA contract negotiation. So you have some shippers who are doing some front loading to get ahead of that June 30th, July 1st date. So ideally, we'll be a little bit better prepared this time for the influx of cargo.
So as they're shut down right now and there's kind of this slowdown, I guess, are we seeing a slowdown into the ports right now? And is it an ability for the ports to kind of catch up to kind of mitigate some of that 20, 30% uptick when things start firing away again and trying to get a hold of, what is it, July 1st, I think, is the ILU, right?
Right, ILWU out here. And that is hopefully what we're looking at right now is a little bit of a dig out. Only 51 vessels within the 150 nautical mile range total for both LA and Long Beach as of yesterday, from what I can tell. So we aren't quite at the 100 ships outside that nautical marker, but that is the idea. So we've had a little bit of a downswing, which has helped with those empty sweeper vessels, freeing up some space on dock. Clearly, there's been some rail ramp issues with West Coast service coming out here, but we do have a lot of rail containers waiting to go eastbound coming out of LA and Long Beach. So we saw a little bit of a downtick in container volume coming off vessel, but nevertheless, there's only so much space to go around in the harbor, and we're trying to dig out as much as possible, but the downswing has helped somewhat.
Matt, let's talk about that rail aspect a little bit. About 2 weeks ago, we got notice from the San Pedro Ports Complex saying that dwell times for intermodal had increased to just over 5 days. I think it was 5.2 days that they told us in the press release. Do you have any insight on kind of what's causing that increase in dwell times when in that same press release they told us dwell times for trucking was actually going down?
Right. And I guess, depending on where you're measuring at, because we're still, I believe, above 8 days for street dwell. My understanding is that there was a limit of available rail tables out here on the West Coast, and it was only one of the two major carriers. So I think that was exacerbating some of the challenges that they were having inland, whether it was relative to labor or chassis availability to move stuff off the rail ramps. So from what my understanding was that there was a lack of rail tables that were available. It was causing some of the backup out here.
Yeah. So, Matt, as you know, we're looking at the health of the overall health of the trucking industry has always been something that FreightWaves has looked at, and one of our missions is to make that very, very clear to everybody so we can make the proper decisions. Right now, we're looking at the possibility of what you might call a bloodbath of trucking. There's a little bit of hype there, but seriously, there's 20,000 new authorities came on, and record level in the last month or a month ago with equipment that is cost them 3 times what its value was just a year ago or 2 years ago, and probably will be in another year. This bloodbath that could potentially happen, how does that affect the ports?
Well, for us, really, it boils down to truck availability, because out here in California, as you know, we are looking at the end of this year for a California Air Resources Board legacy deadline that will kick in, eliminating all 2007 through 2009 engines from port service. In LA Long Beach, we're talking about 6,000 trucks that are registered to do business here. Up in Oakland, about 1,600. Of the daily callers in LA Long Beach, we're close to 30% of all cargo is moved by 7 through 9 engine technology. So without the availability of used vehicles, especially, or even the build slot availability for the new truck side, there is an eye being very closely leveled on what's going to happen at the end of this year. Hard to just rip 30% of capacity right out from the market without feeling it across the supply chain. So that really has a trickle-down effect here from truck availability, So that is something that's really on our mind for for kind of the larger ecosystem here and how that's going to reverberate through the chain.
And so you mentioned that it's a legacy deadline, and I know there's been a lot of fight about kind of pushing this back or attempt to try and look for some exemptions to the rule, some flexibility because of the supply chain issues and the fact that people haven't been able to get newer equipment or equipment upgrades just because it's been so difficult to find truck parts and to find folks to put those truck parts on, frankly, as well. Have you seen any flexibility starting to be kind of granted by the California Air Resources Board, or are they still just being incredibly stringent on this is the deadline and it's happening regardless of who it impacts?
I would say the latter. Unfortunately, here in California, we are on the bleeding edge of environmental restrictions. And outside of these legacy diesel rules, what they're currently promulgating has to do with zero emissions entry standard for any first-time VIN that's put into the drayage truck registry throughout California. That includes LA, Long Beach, Oakland, Stockton, Sacramento, Wainimi, all of the intermodal rail yards down here. So it's not just impacting the maritime ports and some of the larger volume maritime ports. We had reached out with a large coalition of other trucking organizations to the Air Resources Board requesting a little bit of flexibility. So far, the discussions haven't been any more fruitful than we expected, let's put it that way, but we are definitely keeping an eye on the ball, and we're not just going to let this go quietly into the night. We need to come up with that identifies these challenges that we're going through here currently, and hopefully we'll get a little bit, some type of targeted relief. No one's asking for a full-blown delay at this point in time because, frankly, it's unrealistic when it comes to California policy. They're not just going to punt the deadline. So we're looking for some targeted relief, but nothing has moved the needle yet.
Gotcha. So, Matt, July 1st is coming up. Everybody is understanding of this. There's a lot of things that are distracting us from it, but it's coming. Worrisome from a short term, a midterm, and to me, even a long term, because part of this issue is fighting against technological improvements and automation, et cetera, which I think we've all learned are pretty necessary for maintaining and creating, or not even, we don't even want to maintain, but improving the efficiencies of our ports. What are your thoughts on this?
Ideally, we'll see some type of happy medium. Understanding that there's a need for good paying jobs here on the harbor, but also understanding that the technological wave has been here for a while at this point in time. The shortest turn times in the harbor outside of some of the Jones Act terminals is Long Beach Container Terminal, which is a fully automated marine terminal. So it's clear that there are the productivity gains there from automation. However, we have to balance that against the need to continue to provide good paying jobs. Now, where the issue comes really is diversion. If costs continue to go up for West Coast moves, you have Houston, Savannah, Charleston, all looking for increased cargo volumes. And shippers are going to vote with their feet. Obviously, we're in an interesting ocean rate market right now, to say the least. But if there is a problem that comes up for a shutdown, we've heard PMA say they're about 50-50 on whether or not we'll actually see a shutdown come July 1. So, who's going to die on what hill, I guess, remains to be seen. But automation is definitely a component. And from, I think, the entire industry standpoint, we really feel that there has to be some middle ground that's reached by both parties because, we can't continue the same level of activity without having more efficiency put into the mix.
So we're just about a quarter away from this deadline happening, a quarter of the year away. Have you gotten any sentiment from the workers themselves on how they're kind of feeling? I'm sure that there's some nerves running through the areas. We're starting to look at the ILWU negotiations and kind of revamping this labor plan. But it really does affect those workers the most, right? Have you gotten any sentiment from them?
Well, when PMA asked the ILWU for a year extension, I think that the sentiment was pretty clear. There was no way that they were going to delay any type of negotiation because they are in a very good bargaining position. They worked through the pandemic. Several folks die because of the COVID virus. So they are in a position that they feel is very strong from a negotiating standpoint. When you think about the rank and file and even some of the skilled operators, they feel that they're in a good position, especially because this administration has been very clear about their willingness to support any labor movement across the nation here. So I feel like there's definitely another eye being leveled on the contract negotiation that's coming up. But we're trying to get through the day-to-day here and understanding that we could see a major ripple. But this 2022 is going to be quite an eventful year with major things happening between the ARB deadlines and between this contract negotiations. It's really going to set the tone, I think, for the next several years, depending what happens in the next several months.
Very interesting stuff, Matt. We'll be watching to see what's going on there. The 50-50 doesn't bode well, I don't think, and I think would be putting more and more pressure on shippers, BCOs, saying, hey, let's get to the East Coast or Texas coast here and try and avoid this there. So, very difficult. Like you said, bumpy times, interesting times to see what's going on there, to say the least. Thank you very much for being with us, my friend.
Thank you for having me. Nice to see you, Michael, Kaylee. You guys have a great day.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you soon, Matt.